Hey, what's up, guys? Another different type of video here, hopefully with less weird mic or webcam desyncing. But in the aftermath of me being done with roster editing for NHL 20, thank God, I now have time to start making other videos again, which is what I wanted to do. And obviously, with the jersey collection rundown video and being able to catch up on that, here's another video that was requested on Patreon a while ago that I'm happy to finally be able to do. And again, we're going to get back into, GM trade histories, draft recaps, or, redraft, stuff like that, heading into the summer. But yeah, today's video, you already know about the title, is my favorite player from every NHL team, which is a question I get asked all the time. And without proper preparation, being able to sit here and think like, oh, okay, who played for this team and when? Yeah, it can be overwhelming. But I have come up with a list of my favorite player from every team all time. Now, if the question is currently, well, then that'll have to be a different video then, won't it? But all time favorite players from each team. Now, first and foremost, despite wearing a Hartford Whalers sweatshirt, I'm not going to be doing Hartford. They weren't really around when I was growing up. We're not going to be doing the Minnesota North Stars, the Quebec Nordiques. Wasn't old enough to remember them. But say, for example, a team like the Atlanta Thrashers. I'll be picking my favorite player from that team. Let's get down to it here, because I don't know how long this video is going to be. I don't even know how much editing I'm going to put into this, but yeah, no, this video needs to be done. So, hey, here we are. Let's do it. Let's roll. Favorite player, all time, Anaheim. Call them the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. Call them what you will. This one should be pretty obvious. It's Teemu Selanne. How could it not be? Now, there are some honorable mentions here. Paul Kariya, J.S. Jaguar. And for a current Duck, I do love some Ryan Getzlaf. How could you not? But it's Teemu Selanne. And here's the thing. When it comes to being like, oh, and here's why. Why do you think Teemu Selanne is my favorite player in Ducks history? It's Teemu frickin' Selanne. So there's not too much to say. I could sit here and be like, well, here he scored a lot of goals. Yeah, you know that. So there's really no point in just being like, and here's my justification. It's just, no, Teemu Selanne was an amazing player, and he was my favorite Duck of all time. Next up, the Arizona/Phoenix Coyotes. And there are some, potential nominees, but not really. What I tried to do with this list is really have the players, really only nominate them for the teams that I identify those guys as being a part of. So, for example, with the Bruins, I'm not going to be like, Jaromir Jagr is my favorite Bruin. No. Obviously, you identify him more as a Penguin, as a Cap, as a Ranger even, or maybe a Dallas Star. Yeah, that time Jaromir Jagr played for Dallas. It's so weird. But anyway, so with Arizona, you could have a player like Jeremy Roenick, but I went with Shane Doan because whenever I think of that franchise, the player I think of is Shane Doan. And the one thing you could say about Shane Doan, loyal to a fault, because, man, I don't know if he is, for me, he's not quite, he's in that Dave Andreychuk level, where it's okay, one of the greatest of all time. You're not quite in that Marcel Dion category or, say, the Ovechkin or Ray Bourque category if you were to have never won a cup. But you're in, that Dave Andreychuk level, for Shane Doan, where it's it would have been really nice to see you win. But unlike Dave Andreychuk, who played for the Bruins, for the Leafs, for the Lightning, Shane Doan stayed, and he really shouldn't have. But it is commendable, at least, to have that amount of loyalty. Although there was that quote in 2015 or something like that, where he's like, I'm not happy about the team getting rid of some of our better players. And it's Shane, that should have been the warning sign that you should have asked out, because that team simply wasn't going to win. But I do appreciate the loyalty. Shane Doan, my favorite Coyote of all time. Then we move to the Atlanta Thrashers. Now, there are some good choices here, but for me, there's only one. It's Ilya Kovalchuk. Again, I know some people are going to be like, but what about Danny Heatley? What about this guy? It's Ilya Kovalchuk. And it's funny because when he was coming back from the KHL, and it was oh, is he going to go to Boston? Is he going to go to LA? I'm like, please come to Boston. Please come to Boston. And then when he was a free agent this year, before he went to Montreal, I'm like, please come to Boston, because I love Ilya Kovalchuk. And, obviously a big part of my favorite players of all time comes down to, the video games I grew up with, the hockey I watched growing up. And, Ilya Kovalchuk was the man. He was the man. And, yeah, really wish he ended up being a Bruin at some point. But hands down, there's no honorary mentions there. Ilya Kovalchuk, my favorite Thrasher of all time. Which brings me to the Boston Bruins. Now, I could sit here and rattle off hundreds of names, literally hundreds of names that I love, but Patrice Bergeron is my favorite Bruin of all time. Now, I grew up loving Ray Bourque, because how could I not? And then there was someone like Glenn Murray, in the early 2000s, one of the most underrated goal scorers of his time. And then, of course, in later years, you've had likes of, like what Zdeno Chara has meant to the Bruins in terms of turning them around, where there was some lean years in the, mid-2000s there. And Tuukka Rask as well, who is, for my money, the best goaltender in franchise history. But Patrice Bergeron, in terms of, growing up, if you're a fan, and I am one of those people as well, I forget who else, like there's some people, I think Ken Reed of Sportsnet's a big one, where it's like, why do we call them the original six? They're not the original six, they're the six that survived, essentially. But when you look at the original six teams, obviously, there's that lineage there. So you sit there growing up as a fan of one of those teams, and you hear like, oh, this guy was amazing. This guy is really summarizes. This guy really stands out as what it means to be a player for this team. And Patrice Bergeron checks every box for, growing up, what you heard, like, oh, this is what a Bruin does. I mean, Patrice Bergeron is, a Hall of Famer, surefire, in my opinion. Shame he only has one Stanley Cup. I believe I'm recording this on the 9th anniversary of the Bruins beating Vancouver. You're welcome for bringing that up again. I will continue to bring that up. But, again, there's some honorable mentions. You talk about my first ever favorite player, that being Ray Bourque. But, yeah, now Patrice Bergeron has surpassed him. And it is a shame. I think it kind of goes that way for every player of this era, where you talk about, okay, there's been a lockout. We haven't seen them at the Olympics as much. Then, the whole deal this year, which I'm not going to say the word because apparently not that I expect this video to do well, but that can suppress the video. But yeah, Patrice Bergeron, favorite Bruin of all time. Favorite Sabre of all time. You might think it's an easy choice. It's not. We're going off the board here. Jochen Hecht is my favorite Sabre of all time. Not Maxim Afinogenov, not Henrik Tolinder, not Dominik Hasek, but for whatever reason, and it's because of the games I grew up playing, which I'm pretty sure there was a demo of NHL 2000 on the original PlayStation where you got to play Buffalo against Dallas. And God damn it, I loved Jochen Hecht for that reason. So, one of the best German players of all time, and my favorite Sabre of all time. But you notice how every single one of the players I mentioned were guys that wore the black, red, and silver for Buffalo. The best jersey they ever had. Hands down, not an argument. For the Calgary Flames, it's easy. It's Jarome Iginla. How could it not be? Now, again, I'm not going to choose him as my favorite Bruin of all time, even though, man, am I happy he was a Bruin. Although I would have been more happy if he was a Bruin in 2013 instead of 2014, because if he was a Bruin in 2013 instead of being a Penguin, where he lost in the conference final, he would have been with the Bruins going to the final and probably would have helped beat Chicago because it was Jarome Iginla. Mika Kiprusoff gets an honorable mention here, but Jarome Iginla, hands down. Don't really feel like I need to justify it. An amazing player. Carolina. I had trouble with that because I don't have a big connection to the Hurricanes or anything like that. I went with Eric Stahl because it's true. Out of basically anyone who's ever played for Carolina, I do like Eric Stahl. I thought, there was a time within the past 2 years or so, it's like, oh, he might end up being a Bruin. And I'm like, depending on the contract, I'd still be okay with that. But yeah, no, Eric Stahl, favorite Hurricane of all time. Don't have too much of a justification for that. Favorite Blackhawk of all time. It's not Taves, it's not Kane, it's not Keith, it's not Tony Amani. It's Corey Crawford. I respect the hell out of Corey Crawford and what he was able to do, taking over for Antti Niemi, even if it meant beating the Bruins, but doing what he was able to do, helping the team win the last two cups, that Chicago managed to win. And right or wrong, his determination to continue his career, because man, has he shrugged off some injuries. But Corey Crawford, my favorite Chicago Blackhawk of all time. Which brings us to Colorado, and this might be the longest list of honorable mentions. It's not Milan Hajduk, Joe Sakic, Adam Foote, Alex Tanguay, who I love, Patrick Waugh, Peter Forsberg, Rob Blake, Chris Drury. I love them all. Yeah, 2001's a pretty big theme here. My favorite Av of all time, one of my first favorite players of all time, is Adam Deadmarsh, which is an incredibly underrated name in my opinion. An Olympian in 2002, but he was off that Colorado team at the time they won the 01 Cup, but he was a part of the 96 team. I don't know why. He's just one of those players where growing up, I'm like, NHL Breakaway 98, Adam Deadmarsh, this is my dude. I don't know why, but Adam Deadmarsh is my favorite Av of all time. And I'd be lying if I said he wasn't. So I'm not going to pick the more popular answer of like Peter Forsberg, even though I love every Av that I just mentioned. But yeah, no, it's Adam Deadmarsh, which brings us to CBJ, Columbus. It's Rick Nash. How could it not be? And you talk about a player where I'm like, it's pretty sick that they were a Bruin. Rick Nash. Wish he would have won a cup. Wish he would have been able to hang around for a little bit longer. Seems like a fever dream that he was a Bruin. But Rick Nash is my favorite Blue Jacket of all time, hands down. Dallas Stars. It's not Mike Modano. It's not Marty Turco. It's Yuri Lehtinen. I don't know why. Again, you talk about that kind of era, late 90s, early 2000s, when I'm first really starting to understand what's going on and following and, falling in love with hockey. Yuri Lehtinen, I mean, in terms of like a two-way player and what he was able to do, I mean, damn. Just a hell of a player. Underrated player, because again, when you think about Dallas, you probably do think of Mike Modano, and that was Mike Modano's team, but Yuri Lehtinen was a fantastic player as well, a fantastic player at that. Detroit, a lot of options. Went with Pavel Datsyuk because it's Pavel Datsyuk. Henrik Zetterberg is right there with them. But if you were to ask me, would you rather watch Datsyuk highlights or Zetterberg highlights? I'm going to go with Datsyuk highlights because, Jesus Christ, what a player. I mean, 98 draft pick? 6th round, 7th round? No, Zetterberg was a 7th round pick. But regardless, just ridiculous how everyone missed him and how good he was. And it's a shame he went back to the KHL when he did. Edmonton. Controversial pick here for Edmonton. My favorite Oiler of all time is Connor McDavid, because holy hell. You sit there and you talk about Pavel Datsyuk a second ago and just being like, my God, what this guy can do with the puck. Connor McDavid does that now, and it's perhaps even more impressive because of how the league has changed. And, you talk about it. Growing up, if you're, someone my age, shout out to the dog, growing up, if you're someone my age, you sit there and you just missed out on the Gretzky era, the Mario era, for the most part, at least Mario in his prime. But, and we have this era now where it's, very much, growing up, getting to watch the Crosby and Ovechkin era, and now we're in the beginning stages, it's been 5 years already, but now we're in the beginning stages of the McDavid era. And, certainly, those three players in particular are the players that, we're going to be old people about, God willing. I make it that long. But, those are going to be the players that you talk about where it's like, well, yeah, you get to see this guy, but I saw these guys play. And that's Connor McDavid already. And, I mean, hope to God, avoid lockouts. Let him go to the Olympics. I want to see what this guy can do by the end of his career. But he's already my favorite Oiler of all time. Not even a discussion. For the Florida Panthers, it's really tough. I don't want to pick Nathan Horton. I don't want to pick Gregory Campbell because of their Bruins affiliations. So I went with Roberto Luongo because, 2011 aside, I respect the hell out of Roberto Luongo. His Twitter game is fantastic. I mean, it's tough to not like Roberto Luongo, and it's impossible to at least not respect him. Should he, be the Florida pick as opposed to the Vancouver pick? I do kind of view him as more of a Canucks player than a Panthers player, but for the sake of this list, we went with him as a Florida Panthers player. For the Los Angeles Kings, it's not even a discussion, mainly because I considered Rob Blake a member of the Avalanche. Hands down, no other players in the running. It's Anze Kopitar because damn, you talk about one of those players where it's like, I wish you played for my team if I didn't have Patrice Bergeron. Sounds like Kopitar. I mean, incredible stuff. Very happy, of course, to have seen him, raise the Stanley Cup twice. He's just a ridiculous player. And, it's a bit of a shame because, even when the Kings were winning cups, for the most part, it was always like, oh, he's such a good defensive forward, but he puts up points too, man. He is one of the most complete players to this day in the NHL. I love me some Anze Kopitar. For the Minnesota Wild, two names, very tough to pick. Marian Gaborik is the runner-up. Philip Kuba is my favorite Minnesota Wild player of all time. Why? I don't know. I just love Philip Kuba as a defenseman. It doesn't make any sense, but just a player that I absolutely adore, kind of in a similar meaning or a similar way, I guess, for Adam Deadmarsh, where it's just like, I don't know why, but I love Philip Kuba. What a defenseman. Look him up if you know nothing about him, which is a good chance that you don't. Oh, boy. Montreal. Runner-up, Michael Ryder. Again, didn't pick him for the Bruins affiliation. Saku Koivu is also a runner-up, because who can't respect Saku Koivu? My favorite Hab of all time is PK Subban, because I'd be lying if I said that he wasn't, for the longest time, Montreal's Brad Marchand in a way. Now, for some people, and allow me to explain this, for a lot of people with Brad Marchand, it's nope, I wouldn't even care if he was on my own team, I'd hate him. But I'd say for the vast majority of people, he's our jerk. I wish he was my jerk so I could love him because, yeah, he does what he does, but hey, it works and he puts up a lot of points. He's really good. And for PK, that's what it was. Not saying PK Subban went around licking people, but to have your favorite team's biggest rival have PK Subban in their lineup, especially when PK was kind of at his peak, it sucked. And all I wished, of course, was that he played for the Bruins because, damn, I love his game. And I'm intrigued to see what happens with PK over the next couple of years. I mean, this year in New Jersey, downhill and rough, but intrigued to see, what happens, if it was really injuries that kind of dragged him down or what. But intrigued to see what happens next for PK. Hell of a personality, hell of a guy. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't my favorite Hab of all time. And an honorable mention as well to Carey Price. I know. Shocking, I know. But again, talk about one hell of a player. At the time, at his peak, he's okay to this day. And one hell of an individual as well. For the Nashville Predators, speaking of Habs, Shea Weber. I mean, David Legwand's kind of up there. JP Dumont's up there as well. But, Shea Weber, especially, when he and Chara were going back and forth, slap shot, hardest shot competition, stuff like that. I love Shea Weber. It kind of sucks. He's a Hab and the captain of the Habs. But, is he the captain? Yeah, he is the captain of the Habs. Ugh. Should have stayed in Nashville. Would have liked him more if he went to Philly. God damn. But yeah, Shea Weber, favorite Predator of all time. For the New Jersey Devils, there's a lot of options here. Brodeur, Elias, Langenbrunner, Ralston, Rafalski, Gianna, Bill Guerin, Jason Arnott. But there's only one who stands tall. Peter Sikora. Why do I love Peter Sikora? I don't know. Aside from the fact that, my God, did the man score clutch goal after clutch goal after clutch goal in the playoffs. Just, again, another one of those players that I absolutely love for no reason. But Peter Sikora is my favorite Devil of all time. For the New York Islanders, I have to be completely honest, this was tough. I don't really have strong feelings towards that many Islanders players all time. And the ones that I do ended up being Bruins or were Bruins, like Johnny Boychuk, for example. I went with Ziggy Palffy because it's Ziggy Palffy. Hall of Fame name, solid player. Maybe, not the one guy you identify the most with the Islanders, but all in all, I went with Ziggy Palffy. For the New York Rangers, there's only one, which is shocking, I know, but there's only one name that came to mind, Henrik Lundqvist, which, I already talked about earlier in this video. The players that are up there for, my God, just win a cup or it's going to be really sad. Henrik Lundqvist is perhaps at the top of that list currently, now that, of course, Alex Ovechkin has won a Stanley Cup. For the Ottawa Senators, favorite player all time, Jason Spezza. Not even close. And it's kind of for the similar reason as Anze Kopitar. Growing up around 2007, 2008, into 2009, those games that were out, whether it be EA or 2K, the players that you got to build your team around, Anze Kopitar and Jason Spezza. Every single time, and you would win cup after cup after cup after cup. I love Jason Spezza. And, it's been nice. Granted, it's been for Toronto. But it's been nice to kind of, see his resurgence this year, especially in the aftermath of Mike Babcock being fired, because, hey, who knew Jason Spezza still had gas in the tank? But, yeah, Jason Spezza, favorite Sen of all time. Favorite Flyer of all time, it's Eric Lindros. Again, one of my first favorite players from a different team, at least not from my favorite team. And, again, ridiculous player. It's kind of a shame injuries dragged him down the way they did. Kind of a shame that, I'm not going to say it's a shame Detroit won back-to-back cups, but, kind of is. For the Pittsburgh Penguins, this is tough. It's not Jaromir Jagr. It is Sidney Crosby. Because, again, you talk about it, the players, you grow up hearing about how great Gretzky and Mario were, and now in this new era, I got to live through it and see those players. And in a lot of ways, it always happens. When you get to sit there and talk about like, oh, wish I could have seen, the Gretzky era, or football-wise, for example, either or, right? You could sit there and talk about like, oh, I wish I could have seen, I don't even know, you could go far back as Pele if you wanted to, but, being someone my age, it's like I've gotten to see Messi and Ronaldo play out their primes, or, NFL football style-wise. Got to see Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, and, again, for Sidney Crosby, it's just, I understand why people don't like him, especially if it was the early reputation that he earned, but no, he's one of the best players to ever play, and the fact that thankfully his career was not cut short like it looked like it might have been in the early 2010s, which is insane to think that decade's over with now, but that's a whole different discussion entirely. Yeah, no, Sidney Crosby's up there. For San Jose, I kind of broke my rule here. Now, I love Marleau, Pavelski, Couture, Burns, Nolan, Nabokov, Sturm. That leaves one player left, and it is because I view him more as a Shark than I do as a Bruin, and it's Joe Thornton. For obvious reasons, I feel like this is the one spot where I can break the rule. Again, you talk about that list of great players to have never won. Is Joe Thornton, you talk about him and Lundqvist right now and what the order is, but regardless, they're up there. Patrick Marleau as well, too, but I don't really think I need to explain why I love Joe Thornton. For the St. Louis Blues, honorable mentions, Backes, Pietrangelo, Pronger, Tkachuk, went with Pavel Demitra, who, again, talk about underrated, although I feel like a lot more, people in wake of his passing started to understand how good of a player that he was. But yeah, by far, Pavel Demitra, my favorite Blue of all time. For Tampa Bay, honorable mentions, LeCavalier, St. Louis, Kubina, Brad Richards, Nikolai Hobby-Bulin. I went with Ruslan Fedotenko. Again, clutch goals in the 0-4 final. Sorry, Flames fans, to bring that up. But, for that reason, really with Calgary, I should have put Jelena in there for an honorable mention. If you haven't noticed, I do like players who can score big-time goals. And Ruslan Fedotenko could absolutely do that. Really solid player in his career. For Toronto, I guess I broke the rule here again as well. Phil Kessel. You could view Kessel as a Bruin, you could view him as a Pen, but when I think about Phil Kessel's career, I think about him as a Toronto Maple Leaf. And, call it cheating if you want. It's a shame he kind of had to be the leader of a team that was rather directionless at times. But, yeah, no, Phil Kessel, favorite Leaf of all time. That's really weird to say. For the Vancouver Canucks, only one player, and for the rest of these teams, there's really only one player that I'd consider. For the Vancouver Canucks, it's Marcus Naslund. NHL 05 has a large, a large percentage of the reasoning behind that. But, again, just a tremendous player. For the Vegas Golden Knights, I went with Shea Theodore. Now, Shea Theodore is one of those guys, again, what was he, a Seattle Thunderbird and everything I remember out of the draft. I'm like, the Bruins didn't even have their draft pick. This was 2013, if I'm not mistaken, when Theodore was drafted. They didn't even have their own pick because they gave it to Dallas for Jagr. And I'm just like, find a way to trade up and take Shea Theodore. They obviously didn't. And since then, yeah, Shea Theodore's developed into a solid top four defenseman. And, yeah, my favorite member of the Vegas Golden Knights. For Washington, no real surprise here. It's not Jagr. It's not even someone like Bondra or Ole Kolzig. It's Alex Ovechkin, again, for similar reasons as I've kind of explained already. And last but not least, for the Winnipeg Jets, of course, the modern version of the Winnipeg Jets, the OG version of the Jets. I didn't really see them. Blake Wheeler, again, maybe kind of cheating as a former Bruin, but certainly, he spent way more time as a member of, the Thrashers and Jets at this point in time, current captain of the Winnipeg Jets. And, yeah, again, kind of wish he was a Bruin for a lot longer because Blake Wheeler is one hell of a player. But all in all, my favorite Jet, now that team's been around for almost a decade at this point, which is also insane to think about. So with that, I think we're good. I think we're done here. I am intrigued to know, first and foremost, what you think of the list here. I guess you could disagree, even though it's my list. I am intrigued to know as well your list, and do you consider it cheating that I had some Bruins like Kessel and Wheeler as my favorite players for other teams, even though, again, I mean, Phil Kessel spent way more time as a Leaf than he did as a Bruin. I think we're good. I think we're done. Like I said, a bit of an off-the-cuff video that I kind of owed Patreon, and again, we'll be getting back into the more talking hockey style of videos as opposed to just NHL 20 stuff now that I'm done with the roster editing. I thank you for watching. You know the deal. Support the video, support the channel. Greatly appreciated. A shout out to my patrons over on Patreon. I love you all, and I will see you all very soon with something different. But yeah, this video is finally done. It's in the books. Don't ask anymore.